My son's death was a lie. For 6 months, I carried the weight of his ashes, the memory of his smile, the echo of his last, "I love you," learned to breathe around the permanent stone of grief in my chest. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, I saw him on television, alive, laughing, and holding another woman's hand. The man I had mourned, the child I had buried, was standing in the background of a news report about a lottery winner, living a new life while I was still drowning in the old one. Hello, dear friends. If you believe a mother's love is forever, wait until you witness her strength when that love is betrayed. Please subscribe for stories that reveal the shocking truths hidden within families. The police came on a rainy Saturday morning. I remembered the sound of the doorbell, unusually insistent, cutting through the gentle patter of rain against my kitchen window. I was making pancakes, the radio playing soft jazz, completely unaware that my life was about to be divided into before and after. Two officers stood on my porch, their dark uniforms stark against the gray morning. Their faces were etched with that particular solemnity reserved for delivering the worst possible news. "Mrs. Eleanor Davies," the taller one asked, his voice unnaturally gentle. My heart stuttered. "Yes, is everything all right? May we come in?" I led them to my living room, the same room where Jacob and I had watched our westerns just days before. They sat on the edge of the sofa, while I remained standing, my hands nervously wiping on my apron. "Mrs. Davies, we're here about your son, Jacob," the officer began. "There's been an accident." The word accident seemed to hang in the air. Too small, too simple for what was coming. They explained that Jacob's car had been found at the bottom of a ravine near Black Lake, his favorite fishing spot. The car had apparently veered off the road during a heavy rainstorm. The previous night, it had caught fire upon impact. The fire was intense. They said, their voices careful, measured. They said the remains were unrecognizable. The world narrowed to a single, piercing point of pain. The scent of rain and their damp uniforms filled my nostrils. The pancake batter still sat in a bowl on my kitchen counter. The radio still played. The ordinary continued, while my extraordinary, my everything, had ended. "Are you sure?" I heard myself whisper, the question absurd even as I asked it. Maybe he wasn't in the car. Maybe he got out. The officer's eyes were full of pity. "We found his wallet, Mrs. Davies, his phone, the dental records. They confirmed it. We're so very sorry." The formal identification process was a blur of sterile rooms and sympathetic whispers. I never saw a body. I signed papers I didn't read, accepted a small, heavy urn that felt nothing like the vibrant young man I had raised. The funeral was a nightmare of muffled sobs and black clothing. Melissa clung to me, her body shaking with grief. Our shared sorrow felt like the only real thing in a world that had gone terribly wrong. In the weeks that followed, I moved through my life like a ghost. I would set the table for two out of habit. I would hear a car door slam and my heart would leap, only to be crushed seconds later. The silence in my house became a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. I spent hours in his old bedroom, tracing the faded posters on the wall, holding his old high school jacket to my face, searching for a scent of him that was slowly disappearing. Then came the insurance policy. Jacob had taken out a substantial life insurance policy just a year before his death. I was the sole beneficiary. The agent, a kind-faced man named Robert, handled everything with gentle efficiency. The paperwork felt like a violation, a cold, financial transaction happening in the shadow of my grief. The money, when it came, felt like blood money. I couldn't touch it. I left it sitting in the bank, a toxic monument to my loss. Every time I thought about it, a vague, unsettled feeling would curl in my stomach. But I attributed it to the general wrongness of a world without my son. I tried to move forward. I planted a memorial garden in the backyard. I joined a grief support group. I had dinner with Melissa occasionally, our conversations always circling back to the hole Jacob had left behind. She was struggling too. Her future plans evaporated into thin air. We were two broken women, propping each other up, trying to make sense of the senseless. And then, 6 months to the day after the police had stood on my porch, I was sitting in my armchair, eating a dinner I couldn't taste. And the television showed me the truth. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a trick of my grieving mind. It was my son, alive. The stone of grief in my chest didn't dissolve. It transformed. It turned to ice. A cold, hard certainty that spread through my veins. The man on the screen, laughing with a blonde woman under the bright Arizona sun, had not died in a car crash. He had chosen to leave. He had chosen to make me mourn him. He had chosen to take that insurance money and start a new life. The quiet, grieving mother was gone. In her place was a woman with a mission. A woman who needed to know why. The journey to that answer would take me down a path I never could have imagined. A path paved not with grief, but with the chilling currency of betrayal. The television remote slipped from my hand and clattered onto the wooden floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the suffocating silence of the room. I couldn't move. I could only stare at the frozen, grainy image on the screen, the man with my son's jawline, my son's smile, my son's life. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. The baked chicken I'd been forcing down turned to a hard, cold lump in my stomach. This wasn't a trick of the light. This wasn't the grief-stricken mirage I'd grown accustomed to seeing in crowds. This was a recorded news segment. This was evidence. With trembling fingers, I fumbled for my phone, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. I had to tell someone. I had to prove I wasn't going mad. My first instinct was to call Melissa. She would understand. She had loved him too. The phone rang once, twice. Eleanor. Her voice was soft, laced with the permanent sadness that had clung to her since the funeral. Is everything okay? Melissa, I interrupted. My voice, a strained, unfamiliar whisper. Turn on the news. The Channel 7 broadcast from earlier, the lottery winner's story. Eleanor, what's... Just do it, I pleaded, my composure cracking. Please. Fast forward to the 1-minute mark. Look at the crowd on the left. I heard the faint sounds of her television through the phone, the rapid clicking of her remote. The silence that followed was long and heavy, broken only by the static of our connection and my own frantic breathing. Eleanor, Melissa's voice was now a ghost of a sound. Oh my God, is that... It can't be. It looks so much like him. It is him, I stated, the words feeling both impossible and utterly true as they left my mouth. It's Jacob. That's not possible, she insisted, her voice rising in panic. We buried him, Eleanor. We scattered his ashes. We saw the reports, the dental records. The dental records confirmed it was someone, I said, a cold, hard clarity settling over me. The vague unease I'd felt about the insurance money, his strange behavior the last time I saw him, the convenient lack of a viewable body, it all clicked into a horrifying, monstrous picture. But what if it wasn't him? What if it was never him? We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the implication pressing down on us. The man we had cried for, the future we had mourned, had been a carefully constructed lie. What are you going to do? Melissa finally asked, her voice small and scared. I'm going to find him, I said, the decision solidifying as I spoke the words. I'm going to Arizona. The days that followed were a whirlwind of quiet, determined action. I felt like a detective in my own life, a spy in my own tragedy. I called the insurance agent, Robert, my voice carefully neutral. Robert, it's Eleanor Davies, I said, trying to sound like a confused widow and not a furious mother on the verge of unraveling a conspiracy. I'm going through some of Jacob's old paperwork, and I'm a bit lost. Could you remind me, when did he take out that policy exactly? Of course, Mrs. Davies, he said, his voice dripping with sympathy I now found nauseating. Let me pull the file. Yes, here it is. The policy was initiated 14 months ago. He was very insistent on getting it finalized quickly. 14 months. He had been planning this for over a year. The thought was a fresh knife to the heart. I spent hours online researching the lottery story. The winners were a couple from Phoenix, Mark and Chloe Evans. They had won a $40 million jackpot. I found the local Arizona news station's website and watched the full, high-definition version of the report. And there he was, clearer than ever. Jacob Bohr, whatever he was calling himself now, was standing right behind Mark Evans, his arm possessively around the waist of a pretty blonde woman. She was laughing, her head tilted back, completely unaware that the man beside her was a ghost. I zoomed in until the image pixelated. I studied his face. He looked different, happier, in a careless, unburdened way I hadn't seen in years. His hair was shorter, styled differently. He was tanned. He wore a expensive-looking watch I'd never seen before. But it was him, the tiny, almost invisible scar above his left eyebrow, a permanent reminder of a 7-year-old's reckless bike ride, was my undeniable proof. I booked a flight to Phoenix. I packed a single suitcase, my movements robotic. I felt a strange disconnect, as if I were watching someone else play this part. The grieving mother was gone, replaced by a woman possessed by a cold, relentless need for the truth. I didn't tell Melissa I was going. I didn't tell anyone. This was a journey I had to take alone. As the plane lifted off the runway, I looked down at the city where I had built my life, where I had buried my son. I wasn't leaving as a grieving mother. I was arriving as a hunter. The Arizona heat hit me like a physical wall as I stepped out of the Phoenix airport. It was a dry, blistering heat, so different from the gentle humidity of home. I rented a cheap, anonymous sedan and drove to the suburb where the news report had been filmed. The neighborhood was modern, clean, and eerily perfect. Manicured lawns, stucco houses in shades of sand and terracotta, sprinklers hissing in the late afternoon sun. I found the street, the very one shown on television. I parked a few houses down from the address I'd pieced together from online property records, my heart thudding against my ribs, and I waited. I watched the house, a single-story home with a red-tiled roof and a bright blue front door. It looked like the picture of a happy, successful life. My hands were clenched tightly in my lap, my knuckles white. What was I even doing here? What would I say if I saw him? "Hello, son, I thought you were dead." The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. And then the blue door opened. He walked out, not on a grainy television screen, but in real life, in the flesh. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, carrying a bag of trash to the curb. He whistled a tune I didn't recognize. He looked so ordinary, so alive. Every cell in my body screamed. The air left my lungs in a painful whoosh. The 6 months of grief, the sleepless nights, the tears I had cried onto the urn that held a stranger's ashes, it all surged up inside me. A tidal wave of agony and rage. I watched him walk back to the house, his gait so familiar it made my chest ache. The blonde woman from the news report came to the door, smiling, and he leaned in to kiss her. It was a casual, intimate gesture that shattered what was left of my heart. This was no longer a suspicion. It was a confirmed, devastating reality. My son was alive. He had faked his own death, taken insurance money, and started a new family in the sun, while his old one withered in the shadows of his lie. I sat in that rental car in the growing darkness, the engine off, the sounds of a desert evening settling around me. The hunt was over. I had found him. Now, the real question remained. What was I going to do with the truth? I sat in the rental car as the Arizona night fully descended, the temperature dropping, along with my heart. The interior of the car felt like a confessional, a silent space where my reality was being rewritten. The image of Jacob, my Jacob, alive and well, kissing another woman in the doorway of a house I'd never seen, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. The initial, cold shock was now giving way to a simmering, all-consuming rage. It was a pure, hot fire that burned away the last remnants of my grief. He hadn't just died. He had murdered the son I knew and replaced him with this grinning stranger in the desert. I couldn't just sit here. I had to hear it from him. I had to look into his eyes and see if he could even recognize the devastation he had caused. I got out of the car, my legs unsteady beneath me. The air was still warm, carrying the scent of dust and blooming desert flowers. I walked towards the house, my footsteps silent on the paved sidewalk. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of 6 months of mourning. The blue door seemed to mock me, a bright, cheerful entrance to my personal hell. I didn't have a plan. I didn't knock. I simply turned the handle. It was unlocked. The door swung open into a tastefully decorated living room. It was all clean lines and neutral colors, a stark contrast to the cluttered, memory-filled warmth of my own home. The blonde woman was arranging a vase of flowers on a console table. She turned, a polite, startled smile on her face that froze when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice friendly but confused. And then, from a hallway to the right, he walked out. "Babe, who is it?" He stopped dead. His eyes, the same warm brown eyes I'd looked into 1,000 times, met mine. For a fraction of a second, there was no recognition, just the mild annoyance of a stranger intruding on his evening. Then, the truth slammed into him. His face went pale, the color draining away so quickly I thought he might faint. His jaw went slack. The easy, relaxed posture I'd observed from the car stiffened into a statue of pure, unadulterated shock. "Mom." The word was a choked whisper, a ghost of the voice that had called my name for 30 years. The blonde woman, Chloe, looked from him to me, her smile dissolving into bewilderment. "Mark, what's going on? Who is this?" "Mark." He was calling himself Mark. The name hit me like a physical blow. I took a step forward, my voice low and trembling, not with sadness, but with a fury so profound it scared me. My name is Eleanor Davies. I am this man's mother. I kept my eyes locked on his. And you have exactly 10 minutes to tell me why. I scattered my son's ashes over a lake 6 months ago. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. What? Mark, what is she talking about? Jacob Mock seemed to crumble from the inside. He leaned against the wall for support, running a hand over his face. Chloe, give us a minute, please. But now, he roared. A sudden, violent burst of sound that made both of us flinch. Chloe, her eyes wide with hurt and confusion, fled from the room. The silence she left behind was thick and heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. We were alone. Mom, he began, his voice pleading. You don't understand. Understand, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. I understand that I identified your body, Jacob. I understand that I paid for a funeral for an empty casket. I understand that I cried until I had no tears left while you were out here. What? Starting over? With her. I gestured wildly towards the hallway where Chloe had disappeared. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he cried, his composure breaking. The plan. It went wrong. The plan. I let out a bitter, broken laugh. You had a plan to break your mother's heart. It was the debt, Mom. He exploded, pushing off from the wall, his own anger rising to meet mine. It was crushing me. I was drowning. The business loans, the credit cards. I was going to lose everything. I was so ashamed. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell Melissa. I couldn't face failing again. He started pacing. A caged animal. The insurance policy was my way out. A clean slate. I met this guy. He knew how to make things happen. We were supposed to stage a minor accident, a fender bend. I'd get a fake injury, collect a small settlement, just enough to get my head above water. But he screwed up. The car went off the road for real. He panicked. He set it on fire to cover his tracks. He told me there was a BAFTA, a John Doe from the shelter he'd paid to be in the car. He said it was the only way. He said I had to disappear, or we'd both go to jail for fraud and worse. I listened, my mind reeling. It was a sordid, horrifying story, spooling out of the sun. I thought I knew. So you just went along with it. You let me believe you were dead. You took that insurance money and ran. The amount, $250,000, felt monstrous now. What was I supposed to do? He yelled, his face contorted. Come back from the dead and explain it all. It was done. I got the new identity. I came out here. I met Chloe. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Jacob the failure. I was Mark Evans, a guy with a future. I was happy. His words, I was happy, were the final, brutal twist of the knife. My 6 months of hell were the price for his happiness. And the lottery? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He had the decency to look ashamed. That was just luck. Dumb, stupid luck. It felt like a sign, like I was meant to have this new life. I looked at him, truly looked at him. This man in his expensive clothes, in his beautiful house, with his new name and his new woman. The little boy I'd read bedtime stories to was gone. The young man I'd cheered for at graduation was gone. In his place was a coward and a stranger. You were meant to have this life, I repeated slowly. And what was I meant to have, Jacob? A lifetime of visiting a gravesite that holds a stranger's bones. What was Melissa meant to have? He didn't have an answer. He just stood there, deflated, waiting for my judgment. The cold, hard clarity returned. The rage settled into a firm, unyielding resolution. You have two choices, I said, my voice steady and firm for the first time. You come back with me. You turn yourself in. You tell the police everything. And you face the consequences for the insurance fraud. You tell Melissa the truth. You give that woman, in the other room, the chance to decide if she wants to build a life with a man who would do this to his own family. He stared at me horrified. Or I met his gaze, my eyes dry. Or I walk out of this house, and I drive straight to the Phoenix Police Department. I will show them the news footage. I will tell them everything. And I will press charges for every single cent of that insurance money. I will make sure the world knows that Mark Evans is a fraud and a criminal. I turned and walked towards the door. My hand was on the knob when his voice, small and broken, stopped me. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't look back. The word sorry was too small, too hollow. It couldn't fill the grave he had dug for himself. Your 10 minutes are up, Jacob, I said, and I opened the door, stepping back out into the warm, indifferent night. The confrontation was over. The war was just beginning. The drive to the Phoenix Police Department was a blur of streetlights and silent, screaming resolve. The air in the rental car was thick with the ghost of his confession, the scent of his cologne, the echo of his pathetic, worthless apology. I didn't cry. The tears had been burned away, leaving behind something harder, something sharper. I was a blade, honed by betrayal, and I was heading straight for its source. The police station was a low, beige building, buzzing with the fluorescent-lit hum of other people's crises. I walked to the front desk, my posture rigid, my hands clenched at my sides. A weary-looking sergeant looked up from his computer. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I took a deep breath. The words felt foreign, impossible, yet they came out clear and steady. "I would like to report a crime, insurance fraud, and a death, a faked death." His demeanor shifted instantly, the boredom replaced by focused attention. He led me to a small, sterile interview room with a scuffed table and 2 uncomfortable chairs. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial. Cleaner, another officer, a Detective Miller, joined us. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes that didn't miss a thing. I told them everything. I started from the beginning, the last dinner, the police at my door, the unrecognizable remains, the insurance payout that felt like a curse. I showed them the news clip on my phone, my finger trembling only slightly as I pointed to the man I called my son. I told them about the confrontation, about his new name, his new life, his confession about the staged accident that went wrong, the paid-off John Doe. I laid it all out, piece by piece, until the monstrous picture was complete. Detective Miller listened without interruption, his expression neutral but his eyes taking in every detail, every flicker of pain on my face. When I finished, the room was silent save for the hum of the air conditioner. "Mrs. Davies," he said gently, "this is an extraordinary claim. What you're describing is a very serious, premeditated crime." "I know what it is," I said, my voice flat. "I lived it." He asked for details, the insurance company, the policy number, Jacob's last known alias, the address I had just left. I provided it all, the information falling from my lips like stones. I was turning in my own child. The moral weight of it should have crushed me, but all I felt was the cold, clean satisfaction of truth. "I need to make a call," Detective Miller said, standing up. "We'll need to verify the insurance claim and coordinate with the jurisdiction where the accident was reported. This will take some time. Would you like some water? Coffee?" I shook my head. I wanted nothing from this place, except justice. While he was gone, I sat alone in that room. I thought about Jacob as a little boy, how he would run to me with scraped knees, trusting me to make everything better. Now, I was the one ensuring he would feel a pain far greater than any physical wound. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. Detective Miller returned an hour later, his face more serious. "We've confirmed the active insurance policy and the payout. We've also made contact with the authorities in your home state. They are reopening the case." He paused. "We are dispatching officers to the address you provided now." A cold wave of finality washed over me. There was no going back. What will happen to him? If the facts are as you've stated, he'll be arrested for insurance fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and likely a host of other charges. It's a federal matter, Mrs. Davies. He's looking at significant prison time. I simply nodded. The words prison time should have shattered me. Instead, they felt like a sentence I had already begun serving the day he chose to disappear. I didn't wait around to see him arrested. I couldn't. Some part of me, the last remnant of the mother I used to be, knew that witnessing my son in handcuffs would break me in a way his betrayal had not. I drove back to my motel, a generic, soulless room that mirrored the hollowed out. The next morning, I went to a local bank. I sat across from a manager and initiated a wire transfer for the entire $250,000 insurance payout, plus the accrued interest, back to the insurance company. The manager was confused, trying to dissuade me, talking about tax implications and paperwork. I was immovable. "This money was obtained through a criminal act," I told him, my voice leaving no room for argument. "It does not belong to me." Clicking the final confirmation button felt like a spiritual purging. The toxic monument to my loss was gone. I was no longer financially tied to his lie. My phone buzzed as I walked out of the bank. It was an unknown number with an Arizona area code. A part of me knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, it buzzed again and again. Then, a text message lit up the screen. "Unknown number, Mom. They took me. They arrested me. Please, You're the only one who can help me. You have to tell them you made a mistake. You have to recant your statement. Please." I stared at the words, each one a desperate claw trying to drag me back into his web of deceit. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry he got caught. I didn't reply. I got into my rental car and drove to the airport. As the Phoenix skyline disappeared behind me, I knew one chapter of this nightmare was closing. But the fallout was just beginning. Melissa was back home, still believing in a ghost. The legal proceedings would be long and public, and I had to return to a town that had mourned with me, and now had to learn they had been grieving a lie. The plane ascended, and I looked down at the sprawling desert city that had housed my son's second life. I had come for the truth, and I had found it. I had come for justice, and I had set its wheels in motion. But as I flew east, towards the pieces of my old life, I wondered if I would ever find my way back to the woman I was before the doorbell rang on that rainy Saturday morning. That woman was gone, as truly as the son she thought she had buried. The familiar scent of my own home should have been a comfort. It smelled of lemon polish, and the faint, lingering aroma of the lavender sachets I kept in the linen closet. But as I stepped inside, dropping my suitcase by the door, it felt like entering a museum dedicated to a life that no longer existed. The silence was different now. It wasn't the quiet of grief. It was the hollow echo of a truth that had unraveled everything. The first thing I saw was the photograph on the entryway table. Jacob, at 16, holding up a largemouth bass, his face split by a triumphant, goofy grin. I picked up the frame, my fingers tracing the glass over his smile. The boy in that picture was gone. Had he ever really existed? Or was he just an early draft of the man who could orchestrate such a devastating deceit? My phone had been blowing up since I landed. News of Jacob's arrest had traveled fast, a scandalous wildfire burning through the small-town grapevine. The local news station had already run a brief lurid segment. Local men arrested in Arizona for faking his own death. My phone screen was a relentless scroll of missed calls and text messages from well-meaning friends, shocked neighbors, and nosy acquaintances. I didn't have the energy to answer any of them. What would I say? There was one person I had to face, however, Melissa. She came over within the hour. She didn't call first. She just appeared at my door, her face pale and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a fresh, raw horror. She looked like she had just been told the world was flat. "Eleanor," she breathed, stepping inside and wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold. "The news, they're saying. Is it true? Is any of it true?" I led her to the living room, the same room where we had held each other and cried 6 months ago. I told her everything. The television broadcast, the trip to Arizona, the confrontation in the house with the blue door, the confession, the arrest. I held nothing back. She deserved the full, ugly truth. She listened, her hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, staring at the carpet as if the answers were woven into its fibers. "He was here," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "The day before it happened. He was right here, on this sofa. He held my hand and told me he was so sorry for the stress his debt was causing us. He said he was going to fix it. He said he had a plan to make everything better for us." She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with a new kind of pain. "He was talking about this. This was his plan, to make me mourn him, to make you." She couldn't finish the sentence. The shared grief that had once bonded us was now a shared betrayal. It was a different, more complicated connection. "What happens now?" she asked. "The legal process will take a long time," I said, my voice sounding tired and old. "He's facing federal charges. There will be a trial. We'll likely have to testify." "And the money?" she asked, a flicker of anger in her eyes. I gave it back. "Every last cent, this morning." She nodded slowly, a grim approval in her expression. "Good." We sat in silence for a while. Two women whose lives had been collateral damage in one man's desperate, cowardly scheme. "I loved him, Eleanor," she said, her voice breaking. "I really did." "I know, sweetheart," I said, reaching over and covering her cold hand with mine. "So did I." The days bled into weeks. I became a ghost in my own town. I saw the looks in the grocery store, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and sometimes judgment. Some people whispered that I must have driven him to it. Others treated me with a fragile, careful kindness, as if I were made of glass. My grief support group felt like a farce now. How could I sit in that circle and talk about my loss when my son was sitting in a jail cell? I felt a strange detachment hearing this. It was like we were discussing a character in a depressing movie, not my son. "And what is a reduced sentence?" I asked, my throat tight. 7 to 10 years, most likely, Angela said gently. In a federal penitentiary. I simply nodded. There were no more tears. My emotional well had run dry. The most difficult moment came about a month after my return. I received a letter, forwarded from the county jail. The handwriting on the envelope was Jacob's. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't even know why I'm writing this. I'm in a cell, and it's so loud all the time. But it's the quiet moments that are the worst. That's when I think about you and Melissa and what I did. I am sorry. I know those words don't mean anything to you now, but I am. I was so scared. I was drowning. And I saw that insurance policy as a life raft. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I know how stupid and selfish that sounds now. The public defender says I should fight it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to plead guilty. I deserve whatever happens to me. I lied to everyone. But the worst lie was the one I told myself that I could just walk away and start over, that the past wouldn't follow me. It always follows you. I think about that last dinner at your house, the rosemary chicken, the way the light came through the window. I wish I could go back. I wish I had just told you the truth. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know that the son you raised, the one who loved fishing and old westerns, he's still in here somewhere. I just buried him under so much fear and lies that I couldn't find him anymore. Jacob, I read the letter 3 times. The words were heartfelt, full of a pain I recognized. But the part of me that had been forged in the fire of his betrayal remained hardened. He was sorry for the consequences, for the jail cell, for the loss of his new life. But was he truly sorry for the 6 months of agony he inflicted, for the permanent scar he left on my soul? I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with any of it. The legal wheels were turning. The sentence was looming, but the emotional reckoning felt like it had only just begun. The world knew the truth now, but I was still learning how to live in it. The morning of the sentencing hearing dawned, gray and heavy, the sky a sheet of unbroken slate that mirrored the weight in my chest. I dressed with a strange, robotic Kara, simple navy blue dress, pearls, low heels. I wanted to look respectable, strong. I didn't know who I was trying to convince, the judge, the courtroom, or myself. The federal courthouse was a monument of cold marble and echoing footsteps. Angela, my lawyer, met me at the entrance, her presence a steadying anchor. It will be over soon, Eleanor, she said softly. Just remember to breathe. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, and more crowded. The air was thick with the low murmur of voices, and the scent of old wood and anxiety. I saw reporters with poised pens, curious strangers, and a few faces I recognized from our town. Their expressions a mix of morbid curiosity and sympathy. I kept my eyes forward, my back straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Then, a side door opened, and they brought him in. Jacob. He was wearing a standard-issue jumpsuit, a dull khaki color that washed him out. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His hair was shorter than it had been in Arizona, and he seemed thinner, smaller, as if the gravity of his situation was physically pressing down on him. He shuffled to the defense table with his public defender, a young man with a harried expression. For a single, heart-wrenching moment, his eyes scanned the room and found mine. There was no anger in his gaze, no pleading, just a vast, hollowed-out regret. It was the look of a man who had finally run out of lies to tell himself. He gave me the faintest, almost imperceptible nod before looking down at his cuffed hands. That small acknowledgement, devoid of drama, was more devastating than any scene he could have made. The judge entered, and we all rose. The proceedings began, a formal dance of legal language that reduced my son's catastrophic betrayal to counts and statutes. The prosecutor outlined the case with cold efficiency, the deliberate planning, the fraud, the emotional devastation left in its wake. He mentioned me, the victim, his own mother, and I felt every eye in the room flicker towards me. I didn't flinch. Then, it was the defense's turn. Jacob's lawyer spoke of a perfect storm of debt and desperation, of a single, catastrophic decision that spiraled out of control. He mentioned Jacob's clean record prior to this, his genuine remorse, his willingness to plead guilty and accept responsibility. Finally, the judge, a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes behind her glasses, turned to Jacob. Mr. Davies, you have the right to make a statement before I pass sentence. Do you wish to do so? He stood slowly, the chains on his cuffs rattling faintly. He turned, not to the judge, but to face me. The room held its breath. Mom, he began, his voice raspy but clear. I know I lost the right to call you that. There aren't words for what I took from you. I didn't just take money. I took your peace. I took your trust. I made you mourn a son who was standing in the sun while you were standing in the rain. At his funeral, his voice broke, but he pressed on. Every day in that cell, I've had to face what I did, not the fraud, not the legal stuff, but what I did to you, to Melissa, to everyone who cared about me. I was a coward. I chose the easiest way out for myself, and it was the most painful path for everyone else. He took a shuddering breath, his knuckles white where he gripped the table. I am so sorry, not because I got caught, but because I hurt you. The man who did that, he wasn't the son you raised. He was a ghost, and I'm the one who killed him. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I needed you to hear that from me. In here, he turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I am ready to accept my sentence. He sat down. The silence in the room was absolute. His words hung in the air, simple, stark, and devoid of the excuses I'd heard in Arizona. This was different. This was a confession from the ruins. The judge adjusted her glasses. She spoke of the severity of the crime, the premeditation, the breach of trust that struck at the very heart of family. She spoke of the need for deterrence. Then, she acknowledged his guilty plea and his expression of remorse. Jacob Davies, she intoned, her voice filling the quiet room. It is the judgment of this court that you be committed to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a period of 96 months. 8 years, the number landed in the center of my being with a dull, final thud. It was real. It was done. There was no dramatic outcry. Jacob simply bowed his head, accepting the blow. As the marshals led him away, he looked at me one last time. There were no more words, just a final, lingering look that held a universe of sorrow before he disappeared through the side door. The crowd began to murmur and file out. Angela placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. It's over, Eleanor. I nodded, numb. I walked out of the courthouse and into the gray day. The air felt different. The world felt different. The frantic, desperate energy that had driven me since I saw him on television, the hunt, the confrontation, the pursuit of justice was gone. It had been replaced by a profound, echoing quiet. I had gotten what I came for. The truth was known. Justice had been served. The son who had betrayed me was gone, and in his place was a convict who would spend the next 8 years behind bars. But as I stood on the courthouse steps, watching the traffic pass by, I realized a terrible truth. The sentence had closed a legal chapter, but it couldn't close the wound in my heart. The gavel's sound had faded, but the echo of my son's confession, I was a coward, would live inside me forever. The war was over. I had won, so why did I feel so utterly, completely lost? The house was different when I returned from the courthouse. The silence wasn't a predator waiting to pounce anymore. It was just silence. The photographs weren't accusations. They were just photographs. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing, and for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. The simple, familiar ritual, filling it with water, clicking it on, taking my favorite mug from the cupboard felt grounding real. While I waited, my eyes fell on the small, framed quote on the wall that had been a gift from my own mother. It read, "A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor." I had always thought it was a bit trite. Now, I understood its brutal truth. I had been through a hurricane, and I was still here. My boat was battered, the sails were torn, but I was still afloat. I took my tea to the living room and sat in my armchair, the same one I was sitting in when I saw him on television. I didn't turn on the TV. I just sat, sipping the hot, soothing liquid, and let the reality of the day settle over me. 8 years. It was a long time. It was a significant portion of a life. My son would be a middle-aged man when he was released. The thought no longer brought me to my knees. It just was a fact, a consequence. He had chosen a path, and this was its destination. I thought about his statement in the courtroom, thought the man who did that. He wasn't the son you raised. He was a ghost, and I'm the one who killed him. Was that true? Or was it a convenient separation, a way for him to cope with the monster he had become? I didn't know. Perhaps it didn't matter. The boy I raised was gone, whether by his own hand or by the choices he made. The man in the prison jumpsuit was a stranger I had to make peace with. For my own sake, the quest for vengeance, for justice, was over. It had been a powerful fuel, propelling me forward when grief would have crippled me. But it was a fuel that burned hot and fast, and now it was spent. What was left was the quieter, more arduous task of rebuilding. Not a life with my son in it, but a life for myself. A few days later, I did something I had been putting off. I went to the lake. I stood on the shore where we had scattered the ashes of a stranger, the place that had become a monument to a lie. The wind whipped off the water, cold and clean. I closed my eyes and didn't think about the funeral. I thought about the good times, the countless summer days we had spent here. Jacob as a boy with his fishing rod, his laughter carrying across the water. Those memories were real. They were mine. They belonged to me, and his betrayal could not taint them. I had spent so long living in the shadow of his lie that I had forgotten. I could still stand in my own light. I started making small changes. I packed away most of his things from his old room, keeping only a small box of mementos from his childhood, the plastic beads, a few favorite books, that photograph of him with the fish. I didn't do it with anger or sadness, but with a sense of necessary closure. The room was no longer a shrine. It was just a room. I decided I would turn it into a reading room, with a comfortable chair and bookshelves for my novels. I had lunch with Melissa. We talked about her plans to go back to school, about a trip she wanted to take. We didn't talk about Jacob. He was a painful chapter we had both survived, but we were determined not to let him be the whole story. The insurance money was gone, returned. My pension was modest, but it was enough. The simplicity of it was a relief. There were no more secrets, no more hidden toxins in my bank account. My life was what it appeared to be. I thought about writing to him. I started a dozen letters in my head, but I never put pen to paper. For now, silence was my healing. Perhaps one day I would find the words, or perhaps I wouldn't. That was a choice I could make for myself, on my own time. The journey had been long and dark, a path through a forest of lies and grief. But I had reached a clearing. The sun was on my face. The air was fresh. The road ahead was my own. I had lost my son twice, first to a lie and then to the law. But in losing him, I had found myself again. I was Eleanor Davies. I was a mother who had loved deeply. I was a woman who had been broken and had put herself back together, stronger at the broken places. I was a survivor, and that, I finally understood, was enough. My dear friends, we have walked a long and painful road together through this story. If this journey has touched your heart, if you have ever faced a betrayal that shook your world, then you know that the path to peace is never straight. It is a winding road, full of setbacks and difficult choices. I leave you with this question to ponder in your own heart. Can true peace ever be found without first facing the hardest truths? This has been one woman's story of unimaginable deception and the slow, steadfast courage it takes to find dawn after the darkest night. If you found strength in my journey, please share your own thoughts in the comments below. Your stories matter. Your resilience inspires. And if you wish to walk alongside others finding their way, consider subscribing to this channel. We are a community built on the belief that no matter how deep the wound, the human spirit has the profound capacity to heal. Thank you for listening. Be kind to one another, and never, ever stop believing in your own strength. Goodbye for now.